to not necessarily go back in time, but to go forward in time, but bring the goodness of the past into the present. And one of the things that I would want to do in regards to that that is good in the past that needs to be brought to the present is community. We have walked away mentally. We've been indoctrinated mentally within our school systems, within the system that's around us to depend on large supermarket stores and government to provide our needs. And it's moving in that direction at a turbo speed compared to any other time in history. I just have to throw this statistic out here to you. The United States prison system, in other words, there's more prisoners in the United States than there are farmers. That should concern you because it didn't used to be that way. This is a statistic that has recently changed. Until just recently, there's always been more farmers than there are prisoners. Now there's more prisoners in the United States than we have farmers. That is shocking to me. I could probably say that 1,000 different ways, and it just sounds like this just can't be so. This is like new, but it's a fact. I grew up a farmer. I'm returning into the farming community. I'm going to stay in the corporate community. I'm going to stay in the business community. I'm still going to keep moving on with what I've always done. But at the same time, I am very focused on making sure that my family, meaning my children, my grandchildren, and so on, are learning the basic skills of farming, homesteading. You know, if you look at the word homesteading, it has a meaning. I mean, we used to think homesteading was just a small 1 or 2 acre farm. It can be. It can be a backyard farm. You can have a homestead on an acre or less. You can grow food in your backyard and have a homestead. Homestead doesn't necessarily govern the definition of the size of the concept homesteading. Homesteading could mean thousands of acres, or it could mean a half acre. It doesn't have anything to do with the size of the operation. It has to do with the mentality of why that you're doing homesteading. Homesteading is very simply, it means this. It means home and steading. Steading means to take care of, to prepare for, to create a system around it so that you are sustainable. So in other words, you want a homestead means that you have a home that you want to sustain. You want to sustain the viability, the security of that home so that you can assure that you have a roof over your head, you have food on the table, that you're not going to run out, and you're not going to be dependent on other things around you. We become very dependent upon the larger stores. And the larger stores have been more and more so, more dependent upon imported goods. A good example, Walmart. I mean, I was mentioning this on one of my social media accounts earlier today. Sam Walton started Walmart with the concept of made in America, made in the USA. His competition was Kmart. His competition was some of the, what I would call mom and pop stores. The smaller stores that were selling merchandise, the general stores, that was his competition. But his competition, his slogan in that competition was made in America, made in the USA. And us Americans, us patriotic Americans that believe in we the people, that population gravitated towards supporting that objective that Sam Walton had of made in the USA. And we know the history of Walmart. You know, Sam Walton got older, his children started taking over. They started allowing products to come into the stores that were made elsewhere other than the United States. And now we know it's mainly not a made in America store at all. It's already put other stores in the communities out of business, whether it be mom and pop or the Kmarts of America. they're gone, pretty much. I mean, there's a lot of mom and pops still left, but not like there used to be. If you look at all the small towns throughout America, they thrived on entrepreneurs that were mom and pop businesses, whether it be a general store, grocery stores, clothing stores, hardware stores, tire stores, what have you. Walmart is just one example in those conglomerates that are uh, publicly traded to be some of the biggest corporations in the world, but they're not stocking their shelves with made in America products like they are made in China or made in other places around the world. So that concerns me. That concerns me heavily because the people of America gravitated to that because they thought this is more convenient. This is like a, hey, I can walk in here, I can get a better price. This is going to give jobs to our small communities, what have you. You wouldn't believe how many Walmarts have moved into small towns over the years, established themselves, and shut down businesses left and right. And then people, young people, when they graduate from high school, looking for a job, can't find a job in that community, and then they have to move away. The population becomes depressed and oppressed in those communities. And then before you know it, even Walmart itself is shutting down and leaving an empty space. Many times that turns into a thrift store, an antique store. You see the old Walmart shut down in different places like that, and then it pushes populations more closer and closer to the metropolitan areas, and it empties out the smaller towns unless they turn into what I would call a tourist attraction, a destination of sorts for other reasons other than commerce and business. And sometimes those towns can stay viable just because maybe they have a university or a college in those towns. That keeps them alive as well. My hometown is a good example of that. It's a combination of tourism and a university, and it's a small town in North Georgia. If it weren't for the university and the tourism, there wouldn't be any jobs at all in that county that would be viable enough to keep the population moving forward. It would be a ghost town. So we see the benefit of these large companies coming in, but we also see the detriment of these large companies coming in and shutting down stores that have been in families for generations. Whether, again, it's hardware stores, grocery stores, clothing stores, whatever it may be. Now, does that really benefit? Maybe in some ways, those large stores, conglomerately around, cumulatively around, have power, and they have lobbying power. They have the ability to do a lot more. And when they stay made in USA, maybe that is good because it brings jobs here that allows people factory jobs and assembly jobs to be able to produce those products, whether it be anything from food to merchandise. But when it turns into made in China shops, that's a different story. And that's what these large conglomerates like Walmart and Home Depot and Lowe's and others have become, very much so. You're not supporting your fellow man here in your country in the United States if you're shopping at these particular venues. I am a diehard fan of buying local. Buy local food from your local farmers markets. Usually a town or an area, a county that you live in, you can usually find a local farmers market that you can go to, and they have local farmers, local craftsmen that you can buy from, that it's more rewarding than buying from a store shelf that is just a piece of junk that's made over in some other country that may not even hold up and may not look good at all, or it may not have any uniqueness to it at all because it's mass produced in China. Now here I want everybody to be clear on this. I'm not against any particular race. I'm not against any particular country. I am saying this in a spirit of concern for our country. Our country needs leadership, state level, local level, and in national level, to put our country first. Is farmland. Our country, our government has subsidy funds that they give farmers not to farm. And that's not not to farm organic. That's not to farm certain crops like corn and soy and cotton and whatever else that it may be. Now, we're not a nation of farmers that just supplies the United States. We're a farm country that has supplied not only the United States but other countries around the world as an exporting country. But the reason that the government pays farmers not to farm their land, that way they profit whether they farm it or not, is so that it balances out export import, so that we're importing more instead of exporting more. It's a balancing act. Not only that, but it also is the government entering into the free market of controlling the costs of goods. And obviously, if you have an abundance of crops rather than a shortage of crops, the price goes down. The country government, I don't see them making decisions to help our prices go down. In fact, I see our store shelves more empty now on an ongoing basis than ever before. So it's not helping the prices. It's driving up inflation. Our inflation is affected by more than just that, but that's just one of those. Why not? I'm just going to throw this concept out there. Why not take those subsidies, the government, taxpayers' money, and instead of paying farmers not to farm, why not use those subsidies to subsidize farmlands to grow organically and to get away from the chemicals like pesticides and insecticides. Pesticides and insecticides obviously keep the bugs off plants and so on and so on, but there's other cleaner ways to do that. Then you have herbicides that are sprayed continuously and fertilizers that are sprayed continuously or injected into the ground that are pure poison. That, guess where that's going? All those chemicals are going straight into your food, and then it goes straight into you when you eat it. What doesn't go into you evaporates into our atmosphere or gets further into our soil, into our groundwater, which is definitely not good. Our groundwater is a cherished resource that we should protect. Now, I won't go too deep into this subject because I'd like to do a different video on this, but it's very important that we understand that my point is, instead of subsidizing farmers not to grow crops or grow food on their farms with government taxpayer money, why not subsidize more organic, non-GMO practices that will help with the health issues that the poisonous, toxic practices occurring and approved by the FDA and USDA today is inflicting on the American people. It's an injustice to the American people and their health for all these poisons to be okay to be utilized in farming. And we are turning our back on this. It's killing our honeybees, it's killing our pollinators, and it's also killing the humans that are eating this food. It may, in some ways, in some people's minds, say that food that's produced with chemicals, in some people's minds, that is a way to make it cheaper. In other people's minds, they figured out what I'm figuring out. It's not necessarily the cheapest way to go if later on you're having to pay your entire life savings out for your medical bills because you have degenerative diseases and cancer and other things that are occurring in your life due to the exposure of chemicals. So, which is cheaper? To take care of yourself and maybe spend a little bit more on organic and clean food and not fake food. You see, we tend to keep going more fake, more preservatives, more chemicals. When you got a loaf of bread on the store shelf that has been there for a week and it's still fresh, and you take it home and leave it on the shelf for another 3 weeks and it still doesn't grow mold, you can guarantee you that there's chemicals in that loaf of bread that when you eat it, it's also killing the good bacteria in your digestive tract. Your GI tract is your health, no doubt. So to eat better, I feel like we need to stand up and to gather together. To live better, we need to stand up and gather together. To have a better future for ourselves, our children, our grandchildren, we need to stand up and gather together. We can cooperate with one another. We can build this system of everyone gathering together in a network of communication where we put our families first by waking up and reading labels and realizing that what you put into your body matters. You are what you eat. You've heard that saying, right? You are what you eat. If you eat cancer, you're going to have cancer. Eat carcinogens. You know, there's no wonder that 2 out of 3 women have cancer. Almost 3 out of 3 women. It's a terrible statistic. There's no wonder that it's almost that same statistic for men. But those statistics change. They're not the same statistics for people who live and eat healthy. It's a whole different scenario. I was on an airplane flight coming from the West Coast to the East Coast here in the United States. And I was sitting next to a farmer, and he grew corn. He had thousands of acres where his family grew corn. And he was telling me about the chemicals that they sprayed into the ground when the corn got up so high. They came through and they had these injectors that would inject the chemicals into the ground, and the corn would overnight, almost within the next 2 or 3 days, pop up another foot or two, because it was a chemical induced growth that was injected into the ground. And part of that conversation was very unique to me. He said, the biggest problem that we've been having is the people who make methamphetamines, meth, illegal drugs. They come to our tanks where we keep our chemicals, and they steal our chemicals, and they make meth with it. That was interesting to me. So an addictive, toxic, poisonous chemical that this gentleman that was sitting next to me on the plane said that when his employees in the farm would drive the tractors to spray these chemicals, they had to wear bodysuits. They had to have oxygen fed to those suits, clean air, because if it got on their skin, it would burn them. It was that toxic. But that is what the government is allowing to be placed on your food and in your food. Secondly, and I'll close with this for sure. By the way, thank you for joining me here on the Welch Family Homestead channel, because this is an important message that I'm trying to give out. We have the agencies within the United States. You got the CIA, the NSA, you got the FTC, you got the IRS, you got all of them. You also have the FDA, right? FDA. What does that stand for? What does the FDA stand for? It stands for Food and Drug Administration. I find that interesting that we as a government do not separate those and make it the Food Administration and the Drug Administration. But instead we have it as the Food and Drug Administration. Why is that connected? Could it possibly be that it is a conflict of interest, since farming practices that are allowed inside the United States that lobbyists push for are endorsed and funded and subsidized by the chemical companies, so that nothing can interfere with the farming practices where big companies like Monsanto and ConAgra, the chemical companies that provide the nicotinamide and Roundup type products that goes out into our soils and on our plants that we're eating. Isn't it interesting that the Food and the Drug Administration are both tied, even though they're one? The Food industry and the drug industry are both tied to chemicals. And one side, the food side, contaminated with harmful, toxic ingredients, whether during the growing period or during the processing period, where it has preservatives placed into processed foods, all chemicals that make you sick, that causes your health to decline, that causes you not to be healthy. But yet, the same agency, food full of chemicals, drugs made with chemicals, the chemical companies owned by the same conglomerates, are protected in the same agency. Isn't that interesting? Just some food for thought. God bless you. Have a wonderful evening from the Welch Family Homestead, calling it a night from the swing under the walnut tree here on the farm. This is Jeff Welch signing off.